Previously on DreamFeed Media. In Did Jen McCabe's Digital Footprint Rat Her Out? We demonstrated that Jen McCabe moved with marked urgency between the hours of 1 a.m. and 2 a.m., far more urgency than when she was searching for and finding the body of John O'Keefe. In How Long Was Jen McCabe in Cold? We demonstrated that Jen McCabe was outside in the cold for a prolonged amount of time in the wee hours of January 29, 2022. We determined that Jen's heart rate could not be detected during or immediately after exposure to the cold. We discovered that Jen did not use or carry her phone between 12:50 a.m. and 1:35 a.m. We observed that during this time, Jen took 662 steps according to her watch. We determined that Jen's Apple Watch can track floors even when it can't track heart rate, and a floor is not recorded while ascending the 4 front steps at 34 Fairview. We concluded that Jen was scurrying around on the main floor of 34 Fairview and outdoors during critical time periods of the night. In Apple to Apple, we demonstrated that descending flights were not logged by Jen's phone nor John's phone that night. We also determined that Jen was likely being deceptive when she claimed she went upstairs during that frantic 6-minute search at John's house. In the real text messages between Karen and John, we demonstrated that John was a consistent communicator, even when under the influence, stressed out, or frustrated. We observed that John had firm boundaries about the use of his phone. We observed multiple times when John prioritized in-person interactions and clearly communicated to others when he was putting his phone away to spend time with the people in front of him. In What 31 Fairview Saw, we identified 88 critical events that Deputy Chief Neighbor's cameras would have recorded. Here's a hint: it wasn't nothing of significance. In Miracle at 34 Fairview, we identified 8 miracles that defied time, space, and logic, including demonstrating what the McCabe saw and did not see, determining what time Karen likely departed, and identifying when Jen McCabe's deceptive behavior began that night. In 34 Fairview Solved, we identified where Karen parked at the bars, why Karen and John chose the route they did, why, when, and where they got lost, where Brian Higgins parked his Jeep, which door John entered at 34 Fairview and at what time, how John's phone arrived at its final resting place, when and by whom, and how John's body arrived at its final resting place. There's only one thing left to prove: what happened between 12:21:10 a.m. and 12:24:37. Let me tell you why I chose the title of this video. Coup de grace is a noun of French origin. It means a final act of execution, especially one delivered mercifully to end suffering. Karen and John's story is one of fire and ice and tremendous suffering for everyone who loved John, and those who have suffered at the hands of incompetent and corrupt methods to obtain justice in John's name. Let's end the suffering today, right now. Hi and welcome back. If you're new, it's nice to meet you. Just a quick warning, I'm so new to technology and YouTube that I don't edit. I try my best to get it recorded in one shot, and if things go off the rails, I start over. But time is of the essence, so we're just going to embrace imperfection today. Apologies in advance if you hear the dog or the doorbell or the toddler. And if you're wondering how a nonverbal 3-year-old can be so loud, well, that's something I ask myself daily. I am not a professional YouTubist, and this is far from a professional studio. We're all just doing the best we can, right? So let's get into it. Maybe Trooper Paul's pirouette theory wasn't so far-fetched. After all, the info from John O'Keefe's Apple Health data made it seem like John spent 3 minutes doing grand jetés and frolicking through the glistening snowflakes across the property at 34 Fairview before doing literally nothing for around 7 minutes except answering a butt dial from Jen McCabe? If you believe the narrative the Commonwealth is trying to spin, and spin, and spin. And as goofy as it sounds, I'd like to picture John pirouetting like a ballerina from those musical jewelry boxes that so many of us had as kids, or like a ballerina in a snow globe. Inside those snow globes, everything is perfect and safe and magical and untouchable. How many Deus Ex Machina moments did everyone have? You know they did. Denial is the first stage. You know they were thinking, John will walk through that door and explain how there was a crazy mix-up, a misunderstanding. Someday we'll look back at this and laugh at how we all overreacted. It was all just a bad dream. It was only a movie. Except it wasn't. Because things that are built of love and hate, glass and ice, they're all so fragile. The things you thought were safe and protected in the bubble you've created, they don't bend, they break. And they don't just crack, they explode. They shatter into a million little fragments. The precious thing, once encapsulated, is scattered, and the glass and the ice and the glitter all look the same. Everyone forgets that ice cuts like glass and that glitter will haunt you for a lifetime. We've been led to believe that what happened to John is a mystery, but it's not. We have the info right in front of us. We can tell exactly what happened if we look at the raw ingredients of the Apple Health data. You see, smartphones aren't actually that smart. They're good little data collectors, but they can't think. They can't reason. They take in the data points, and when it triggers a certain combination of behaviors, the phone makes a guess. Aha, a step. Oh, look, a floor. So we can't blame the phone for misinterpreting the ingredients, but we can blame the humans for not questioning illogical and unreasonable data. We're being told to believe that for 3 minutes and 12 seconds and 80 steps, John's stride length was over 43 inches, and that somehow, during 2 of those 3 minutes, John managed to ascend 3 floors of stairs, which could be mathematically possible if John was 8 feet 8 inches tall, but he wasn't. At 6 feet 2 inches, John's average stride length was 30 inches, 0.71, 30.71 inches. And the difference that it makes is significant. 83.13 feet is not something that you can ignore. But there's a bigger problem. Any human who has ever ascended even one flight of stairs knows this basic truth. Steps on an indoor staircase are not 43 inches apart. Even the Commonwealth can agree that steps on a staircase are not 43 inches apart. Even a first grader can agree that stairs are much closer together than that. Ask a kid what it sounds like when someone is going up or down stairs, and they'll tell you, thump, 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 thump. Not thump, thump, thump. According to Home Depot, residential stair steps are 12 inches apart, and according to Apple Health, the average staircase contains 16 steps. We need to separate the acceleration from the elevation for now. We need to set aside the idea that John ascended and descended 3 floors. Put the altitude away and focus on the footsteps. Stair steps aren't 43 inches apart. They're about 12 inches apart with trim per Home Depot. And even though the Apple Health data claimed 3 floors were ascended, let's start with an even more conservative hypothesis. If John was in the basement, his phone would log around 13 footsteps down to the basement and, did I say 13? I meant to say 16. And 16 footsteps up. So that gives us 32 footsteps and 32 feet. Next, we need to replace 32 of those ginormous 43-inch footsteps with normal, average 12-inch footsteps instead. Oh, and side note, even Andre the Giant, who is 7 feet 4 inches tall, had an average stride length of 36.5 inches. I mean, for heaven's sake, why was nobody questioning this data? So, when we do that replacement, we get John's usual average stride length. But maybe you're wondering, why would John's iPhone miscalculate the distance of his footsteps? The answer? GPS. Apple uses a combination of mechanical input, the thumps, and the acceleration, and it cross-references the distance using GPS. But when GPS isn't available or it isn't working properly, everything gets all messed up and it defaults back to the average stride length based on what it has learned about the user. So let's take a look at some of the limitations of GPS. You can pause the video to read, or you can do the same Google searches that I did, although the phrasing of the summary seems to vary slightly if you're using a phone versus using a computer. But you can do these searches: limitations of GPS, GPS signal in basement, and GPS signal in bad weather. You don't need a PhD, you just need an internet connection. The information is readily accessible to us, to the defense, and to the Commonwealth. For efficiency's sake, I pulled together the most essential details from those searches, and I'll read you that info. These are direct screenshots from Google. You can choose to trust me, or you can choose to go search for yourself. It won't change the information. Unless your name is Hank Brennan, I suppose, in which case the information would be extremely, dramatically different. Armageddon. Signal blockage. Large structures, trees, tunnels, mountains, clothing, and the human body can block GPS signals. When this happens, the GPS receiver may receive less accurate information or no information at all. Basement. A GPS signal in a basement is typically very weak or completely non-existent due to the thick concrete walls and ceiling blocking the satellite signals, making it nearly impossible to get an accurate location reading in most basements. Essentially, GPS is not designed to function effectively indoors or underground. Weather. In extreme cases like blizzards or dense fog, the GPS signal can be completely blocked, leading to significant location errors or loss of signal altogether. Also, heavy precipitation can weaken the GPS signal by absorbing some of its energy as it travels through the atmosphere. Let me show you something else while we're here, and we can knock out another conspiracy from the Commonwealth. This proves why GPS was absolutely impaired that night. It's something called multipath error. Remember when the experts were all so vague about the GPS points, and then they started to say really bananagram stuff like that Karen and John were on Pinecone Road and that Karen's car was still at 34 Fairview at 12:59:25? Well, this is why. You can pause the video if you want to read the fine print and jog your memory of all those wacky GPS claims. But that data was due to something called multipath error. When signals from GPS satellites or cell phone towers bounce off buildings, the GPS receiver can be confused by the extra time it takes for the signal to reach it. This can cause sudden errors in position. Multipath errors are exacerbated by weather. Oh, and get this. Rain or snow can reflect GPS signals off of various surfaces, creating multiple signal paths that interfere with the accurate collection and calculation of location. You know what this means, right? John was at 34 Fairview before the GPS data caught up. John was in that house, and John was in that basement. But what was happening down there? Were they shooting pool? Oh, wait, looking at photos? What photos? Oh, those photos? Yeah, that's convenient. But it's better than the alternative, I suppose. We don't want to say we were practicing fighting stances or warming up our muscles for something more nefarious. The Apple Health data tells us what was really happening down there through the floors metric. See, a normal flight of stairs takes 2 to 5 seconds to ascend. Look at Jen McCabe's data. And even the later floors logged on John's phone when the phone was with a first responder, those stay true to the pattern also. But when you look at John's 1222 entry, it's different for a few reasons. First, the floors are cumulative. They've all been lumped together into one timestamp. Second, the duration between those two timestamps isn't a couple seconds, it's a couple minutes. 2 minutes and 23 seconds. Visualize a place where you might climb 3 flights of stairs in a row: a cruise ship, a hospital, a museum, maybe even a historical tourist landmark like a tower. Unless you have a hindrance like a stubborn, independent toddler, it's not going to take you a sustained 2 minutes and 23 seconds to ascend a flight of stairs. Or 3 flights of stairs. This video clip I'm playing right now of ascending multiple staircases is 17 seconds long. To put that into perspective, we all know that a butt-to-butt dial and conversation can take place in 22 seconds, or 10 seconds if you're on the witness stand. So 2 minutes and 23 seconds is a really long time. Now remember, the terminology used in the trial by both sides was misleading. No descending floors were logged for anybody that night, so going downstairs doesn't count, but going upstairs does. And based on the steps and the GPS interference, we know that John and the phone went down to the basement. And because the phone ended up on the lawn, we know that the phone came upstairs out of the basement. We even know when it happened because there are no other records of floors ascended until later when the paramedics are loading John into the ambulance and leaving the scene. Before you say Faraday bags, please be assured that Faraday bags only stop invisible signals from being sent and received. They don't stop the mechanical functions of the phone, the thump counter, the accelerometer, and the altimeter. Trust me, I tried. With the phone in a Faraday bag and that Faraday bag in a second Faraday bag nestled into a third Faraday bag and a fourth Faraday bag. So the phone was essentially layered Russian nesting doll style into 4 Faraday bags, and it still counted steps and floors. So the floor that we mentioned earlier in our step math, our footstep math, that's going to be our exit floor. Now we just need to account for 2 more floors. But the phone doesn't know what a staircase is. It only knows that acceleration plus 16 thumps or strikes plus 3 meters of altitude tell the phone to record a floor. So we need to find 32 thumps and 6 meters of altitude change, and it has to be steady and ongoing. If you remember from previous videos, I had 2 theories, the keep-away theory and the knockdown theory. I tested both theories in an attempt to replicate John's data, and one of the methods was successful. You see, I found an old iPhone that we don't use anymore, and it became a tool for my experiments. To test the keep-away theory, I threw it 10 feet in the air 10 times and let it fall to the ground. No steps, no flights. Then I threw it 10 feet up, 10 feet wide, 10 times over. No steps, no flights. This was a disappointment because the next series of experiments was going to be painful. But first, I needed to gather a little more information. What is the inseam for someone who is 6 feet 2 inches? How deep are the pockets of men's jeans? I used my husband's jeans and discovered that the inseam was about 32 inches. I also discovered that the bottom of the pockets aligns with the top of the inseam. If John had on shoes, which is debatable, but we can be certain that he paused to ask, they would probably add an inch. So John's phone was approximately 33 inches off the ground. There are 39 inches in a meter. Remember, we are trying to simulate an increase in altitude, so it's just like the old cliche. It's not how many times you fall down, it's how many times you get up. It was time. I forcefully flung myself to the ground from standing position to face on the floor. Then I got back up and hopped twice like a boxer. I repeated these steps 2 more times. Then I remembered that I'm much shorter than John, so I flung myself on the ground a fourth time, just in case. I got up and checked the phone. Nothing. Deeply disappointed, I began to type up the results. Less than an hour later, at the start of another experiment, more on that in the next video, I checked the phone and saw that it had logged a floor and steps. There was just a delay in recording it. And look, it logged it in the same weird way that John's stamp was logged, across several minutes instead of seconds like a normal flight. And look at that delay in the recording time. So, it is reasonable to conclude that between 12:21 and 12:23-ish, while the phone was in John's pocket, John sustained at least 6 knockdown get-ups, more likely haul-ups from the opponent or spectators, as he was fighting for his life. And then, while still within the lag of the logging window, John was separated from his phone. Before you can say, how can it happen so fast, consider this. Plenty of boxers are knocked unconscious within a 3-minute round. Sometimes they get knocked out even faster. Look at this list of the top 5 fastest knockouts in history as of November 2024, ranging from 20 seconds all the way down to 10 seconds. And really think about this. The opponents of the boxers on that list were expecting a fight. They knew that they were about to have a physical altercation. They were in a padded ring. They were dressed for it with gloves and tape and Vaseline on their cheeks. Their muscles were warmed up and ready. They were facing their opponent, evenly matched by weight. There's a bell to start, a referee and coaches, and a medical team nearby. They're trained, they're prepared, they're ready. They know what to expect, and they're literally facing their opponent face to face. And sometimes they still get knocked unconscious within seconds, almost single-digit seconds. John had none of those fair fight elements. It's likely that John didn't even realize Brian Higgins was there if he didn't see the Jeep, and if he hadn't checked his phone. John was ambushed in that basement. John was mortally incapacitated within moments, within minutes. Even the dog got her licks in. John's phone bore silent witness to that brutal beating. While John was bleeding out, dying in that basement, someone else whisked that phone away and dashed up the stairs and placed that phone on a flat surface, probably the dining room table, where it remained for 5 minutes and 7 seconds, until it answered a butt dial from Jen McCabe for 8 seconds, whose phone was mysteriously also not moving during that time, likely side by side with John's. Did they really think they could override the phone's lock? Then the phone remained in place and did nothing for 2 minutes and 4 seconds until it made a 20-second beeline out the front door to the far side of the yard. Toward Deputy Chief Neighbor's house. Can't risk a ping tracing back to the house. Better get the phone outside while the weather is still messing up the GPS signals. Get that digital evidence out of here. We'll deal with his body later. We've got time. John enters the house. From the foyer, John asks the homeowner's preference about shoes. John is greeted and directed to where the guys are, hanging out in the basement. John walks from the foyer to the top of the basement stairs and descends those 16 thumps. By 12:22:14, he has already sustained 1 knockdown get-up because the phone is recording altitude, and it keeps on recording altitude. Changes steadily, repeatedly, all the way until 12:24. By late 12:23, John was separated from his phone, and that phone dashed upstairs where it sat without movement until 12:29 when it answered Jen's call, still without registering movement. John's phone sat for 2 more minutes, untouched and not moving, before it made a 20-second beeline to its final resting place, where it remained again untouched in its own real-life snow globe until 6:04 a.m. John deserves justice. Karen deserves freedom. The dominoes are falling. Prepare for the explosion. If you have found value in this video, please let me know by giving it a like, a comment, and a share. Share it far and wide. Skeptics need to see why the data was flawed and how it changes everything. Please check to make sure that you're subscribed because although this may have revealed the metaphorical final blow, we are not done. There is more to unravel. Until the next one, take care of yourself, take care of each other, and take care of our community. I love you.